Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here tonight. And I'm a lawyer, so I have worked in the past, back in the day, as an activist on climate change in the lead up to the '92 Rio conference on environment and development. And in more recent years, I've worked as a lawyer and as a teacher and as a scholar on climate change. So my friends come up to me who are sort of working in other areas, and they say, I don't know, are you optimistic? Do you have hope for Paris, for the climate negotiations? And my answer to them, at first it was just my answer, and now it's my pat answer because I keep getting asked the same question, is what kind of hope are you talking about? What do you think is going to happen in Paris that I should be hopeful for? And that's what I want to talk to you about, because I think oh, is it not? Okay. How's that? Is that better? Oh, okay. Great. Let me just push it here, because otherwise I'm going to knock it over. Okay, good. So what I want to talk about is what I think we can anticipate from the UN negotiations in Paris that are going to take place in December, and maybe set some framing for it. And to start that framing, the first thing I want to say is that I think it's very important to recognize that people are working on climate change at what we like to call it multi-scalar and polycentric in academia. But really, people are working in towns, as you know. They're working through state government with things like the California Global Warming Act, with renewable portfolio standards, all kinds of things, with national regulations like EPA's efforts to regulate carbon fuel, coal-fired power plants that's current, or the energy efficiency bill that Congress, astonishingly, just voted for yesterday, I think, and with international agreements. My focus is on international agreements, but all of these other actions are the thing that makes the international agreement possible. So the whole shift that we're seeing within the United Nations negotiation is this recognition that we can't decide something at the top and order it to happen throughout all those different levels of society. It's got to come from the ground up. So the meeting in December is just also, I'd like to say, is one focus of the international climate change activities. There's a lot of things going on. I'm just going to talk about this one. The first one what I'm going to talk about is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And I'll refer to it as the UNF Triple C, because if I try to do all the C's, I'm going to end up with the wrong number. So that's a tip. That's a tip. So I've got up here Article 2 of that convention, and that sets the objective. And it might surprise you that back in 1992, we were doing a convention that was having as its objective the stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. Sounds like a great idea. Too bad we waited so many years. The reason it's a framework convention, the idea was that this convention would set goals, it would create institutions, it would provide a forum for regular meetings, and it had a few more detailed measures, okay? But then countries would go off and they would do more specific protocols more specific agreements. And one of those was the Kyoto Protocol. So I'll show you, just sort of flip through as I'm talking, some slides from some of the negotiations. Every year, the countries that are party to the climate change negotiations meet in some part of the world, And this is what the meetings look like. These are some of the people and the things that you might see if you went to one of the meetings. So the UN has always been an active member of this convention. The Kyoto Protocol was one of the key things that there's often a lot of sort of political artwork that's part of this that you see as you walk around. The Kyoto Protocol was done in 1998, and as you know, the US signed it, but didn't ratify it. We didn't become a full party to it. And then President Bush tried to unsign it. There's a question about whether that's actually really possible. But in any case, the Kyoto Protocol did go forward with Europe and a number of other countries, and its first commitment period ended in 2012. Now, you might like to know that at one of the recent meetings, the parties did agree to continue the Kyoto Protocol for a second commitment period that goes from 2013 to 2020. But the US is still not part of that. And Canada, you might have heard, dropped out when they realized they weren't going to meet their targets. There were issues there. One issue was that only industrialized nations had obligations under the Kyoto Protocol. That was the main reason the US didn't sign on or didn't ratify. So there's no obligations for developing countries. Don't lose hope. There's this UNF Triple C that provides structure for ongoing work. Civil society participates in the UNF Triple C, as you can see. A lot of young people go. Scientists go. People from different organizations go. I was looking to see, I'm not sure, I'm sure there are some peace action groups that go and participate. And part of this kind of activity that you see behind me is to inform both other members of civil society and also to inform the delegates who were there for the negotiations about research, about community activities, all kinds of things that are relevant to the negotiations. It also is a place where every country that's a party, and that is virtually every country, it's 194 parties to the convention, and that's almost every country in the world, has a voice. And so small island developing states can speak. They have the microphone. They are able to maybe not change the power dynamics of international relations, but they can bring to bear moral suasion. And that's proved to be quite powerful, as has the voice of some civil society groups, particularly young people who go and are able to actually speak to this group, to the full plenary session at the end of the meetings. So for my money, that's one of the reasons that the UN remains a useful forum. I want to talk a little bit about the kinds of things that are actually being discussed there, okay? So they're going through continuous negotiations leading up to Paris. And one of the sort of key things to know is that there are these different topics. So they're not just dealing with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That used to be true. Now they've added a number of other issues. We've recognized that we have to deal with adaptation. So that's on the agenda. Finance is important. Finance in this case is money to allow developing countries both to adapt and to reduce their own greenhouse gas emissions. And technology, again, technology transfer from developed countries to developing countries so that they can have low carbon technologies as they're developing. That's one of the key elements. Capacity building should also be on this list. These are all central elements of the negotiation. Okay. The expectations for the Paris Agreement are very different from the Kyoto Protocol. So the Kyoto Protocol, as I said, it's there's top-down agreement. The countries of the world got together, said the major emitters have to take responsibility. We're going to divide up. You have to reduce emissions X percent, it was about 5.2%, from 1990 levels by a date certain, 2012. And then they have to divide it up. The US's share was about 7% reduction from our 1990 emissions, had we done it. That didn't work very well. So now, the idea is that, first of all, we have a specific target. The target is to try to keep warming at a maximum of 2 degrees. You guys probably are aware that this is a utopian idea. Nonetheless, the small island developing states in the negotiations are saying, if we don't keep it to 1.5 degrees of warming, we are going to be submerged. So they're really pressing to try to get that into this agreement. That will obviously, be important to see that's one of the things to watch. Should the agreement ultimately say 1.5 degrees, that would be surprising, but suggestive. An important thing that is fundamental to the new agreement, to the Paris Agreement, is going to be that all nations participate. So developing countries will also make commitments. The kind of commitment is the unique thing. So they're called, this is so UN speak, intended nationally determined contributions, or INDCs. So it's intended because, and it's nationally determined because they're saying, well, this is what we think we can do. And the hope is that the kind of international relations dynamic of competition, of national pride will drive countries to want to look more ambitious, to, instead of negotiating how little they can do, that they'll have some impetus to do more. There's also, they're trying to think of a mechanism to build in, to ratchet up ambition. So once a country says this is what we're going to do, that it won't be frozen, that they'll actually be more aggressive about it. It'll include recognition of different national circumstances. Poor countries and rich countries won't be expected to do the same things. And there'll be a lot of variation. A controversial issue is that it'll be a legal agreement, but what that means, we have really no idea. Does it just mean that we'll have a legal obligation to go through certain steps, or does it mean that we will, in fact, have a legal obligation to reach a certain target? I just saw a report this afternoon from an observer to the current negotiations, and this is a quote from it. The USA, as a condition of participation, seeks an agreement that requires nations only to propose actions and report progress, not to achieve outcomes. So these INDCs are bottom-up. I guess I have pretty much mentioned everything on here. And I thought you might like to see a couple of examples. Countries were hopefully going to submit their INDCs by March, and some countries did. So this is for Mexico, and you can notice that Mexico has both unconditional and conditional commitments. That's one of the features. That you say, okay, well, absolutely no matter what, do this, and we might be able to do this, to try to encourage more, to get more pull. You'll also notice that Mexico includes not just greenhouse gases, which are what's within the UNF Triple C itself, but they also include short-lived climate pollutants. And for some countries, black soot, which is one of these short-lived climate pollutants, is something that they might be able to get a handle on, and they might be able to get a rapid response in reducing warming immediate in the near term. So that's very interesting. They also have an emissions peak in 2026. So they're expecting not just to bring their emissions down at some point, but a country like Mexico's expecting its emissions to keep increasing for a while. So I have a few others, but I think in the interest of time, I'll just sort of flick by them, and you can see that the EU, Russia, and the US have all posted their proposals. Russia is very conditional about it, and it sounds like they're not planning to commit until November or December. So I would say, in answer to the question that I get asked so often, that first of all, it's important to remember that our US commitments are shaped domestically. We can't commit to things that we're not already doing. We've discovered that. If we had a different federal government than we do, we might be able to get out ahead and propose something aggressive and show leadership and say that we will do this and then stretch for it, like the space race, you know. We'll get to the moon. Now we need to just do things that have already been done at the grassroots, at the state level, or have been done through the executive branch. Those are the commitments we can make. I don't expect that the 2-week meeting in Paris in December is going to solve the climate crisis. I do believe that the UN negotiation provides a forum and a process that we can use to address it. And I have hope that the world will continue to focus on climate change and deal with it through this process. Thanks very much.